Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss serverless microservice architecture with AWS. So in this video we are going to cover what is serverless function and then what is microservice. First we are going to be dividing these jargons into two sections, and then let's see the architecture with serverless microservice architecture, how it's going to work with AWS. So let's break down the word of serverless. So serverless is means you want to run your code or else deploy your code without hesitant of a server. So you no need to rely on a server to run or execute your code in any one of the cloud servers. So it's a kind of cloud native future which we have, so which is going to be work without a server, where it's going to execute your code. So it's going to act as like a function. If you have been created a regular function, you want to invoke that function, so you're going to call it. That's it. You no need to have it's a setup like you need to have a server and then run it. In case of, let's say, Java, you need to have either Tomcat, or else in case of Node you need to have an Apache, or else any other server. You no need to hesitate about bother about server. So you can basically go through the code, and then you can deploy and execute that code into that serverless cloud native application. So then after, now we're moving to the microservice. So what is mean by microservice? So microservice is nothing but it's not a new term. So it's a regular service only. What do mean by service? A service is nothing but an API where we're going to expose it to a client application, or else it's going to be exposed to a web application, or else it's going to be an application which is going to access and get some resources from our application, or it's going to perform some card operation. So that is a regular service. Then what does mean by microservice? So microservice is nothing but it's going to be kind of a service which is going to be self independently work, and it should not going to be resides in a complex service layer application. So instead, one application can have multiple services. So one service, if it is going to be work independently throughout its life cycle, we can just go for a microservice architecture. So which means we are dividing our application flow into multiple services, so that its entire life cycle is dependent, not dependent on other one. Let's say specific feature is not working, only that service is gonna be get repaired, but other services should not have an impact. Your application will not gonna be break. So now let's just go with one basic example how it's gonna, the microservice is gonna be explained in a better way. So this is just one example, I'm just going with it. So this is regular e-commerce application example. So, so member logs in, customer logs in, and then he did a order. So for order, you should have an order service. It's a kind of one microservice. So this order service is gonna be again divided the responsibilities to back to the message broker, and message broker is actually dividing its responsibility to multiple services. Here, if you see, there's an event from message broker. It's been sent to your notification service, and then consumes payment success event, and then consumes order placed event, and then consumes inventory reserved event. So these are several events. Once an order been triggered, order journey has been triggered by customer, the request or else the event is gonna be triggered to message broker, and message broker will take that request, and it's gonna pops up multiple events back to multiple services, so that the individual service is gonna be triggered like so. So here, let's say notification service has been get intimated saying that there's a new data coming in, so we have to respond. So for that, notification service has its own life cycle to manage its notification thing. Let's say you are going to trigger an email, SMS kind of things. So this specific service will take care of only that responsibility, so that it should not be again resides into one specific API with our monolithic architecture. So it's not going to create any complexity in managing this service independently. Similarly, let's coming into the consumes payment success. It's a kind of shipping service. Like, let's say your payment has been succeeded, then you want to execute a shipping related service, because shipping service will, let's say, it's going to hold the life cycle of the shipping process. Like, first listen the shipping information and then start shipping process, and then it's gonna update the shipping database with the data, and then it's gonna respond back the event back to the message broker. So similar way, we have another service called inventory. Whenever an order received, right? So we should have been cross check whether the stock is been there, or else are we going to place any further order to get the customer get his product on time, and those kind of things is going to be managed in this inventory service. Similarly, so once the so let's say message broker actually first triggers this inventory service, and then the consumes inventory reserved event is going to be triggered, which is nothing but, we've been cross checked from our warehouse, and we identify there is a stock, and then we are been allowing the member to go for a payment. So that's where this event will get triggered. From here the payment service will be triggered. Payment service is only going to maintain the payment related functionality. So here, if you see, our main purpose is not to go with this entire journey, just to focus on this every individual layer of service. Payment has its own microservice, and then inventory is a separate microservice, shipping is a separate microservice, and notification is a separate microservice, and order is a separate microservice. So these all microservices are internally engaging throughout its life cycle for one use case. So that's the reason, we went through this use case. So I hope, we understood what is microservice in detail. Now we'll see. So now we understood serverless and then microservice. So how both are going to be related each other, and then how the serverless microservice architecture that's going to be work with AWS we're going to discuss in this video. Okay. So now let me just go on to a little bit deeper of it. So client or web application which sends an API request. So the API request, first it has to pass through the API gateway. So this is a front end kind of acceptance kind of thing, which is going to take all the requests from the application. Let's say your application have order, your application have user information, your application also have your catalog information, your application is also having product information. Likewise, multiple APIs. First, the request comes to the API gateway. So here we are talking about AWS, right? So here we are taking that example with Amazon API gateway. So which is gonna has a act as a first front end, controller kind of thing, which accept all the requests from the application, and from here it's gonna trigger the event to the AWS Lambda. That's where serverless, right? So one of the serverless AWS service name is AWS Lambda. So the functionality from API which get triggered, that's gonna identify which AWS Lambda the request has to be forwarded. So then from here to here, the request communication has been sent. So now AWS Lambda is a serverless function, right? So how it's gonna decide, the flow, and then how it's gonna perform its own operation. So now we are only concentrating on any kind of application, right? Let's say AWS Lambda has got the request, and then from AWS Lambda, the through the Express server, it's gonna went a request to the Node.js application, and from Node.js here you're gonna write your logic, and you can connect to either DB, and then you can even connect with a S3 bucket, AWS, anything. So then similarly, if you want to notify a message, then you'll just go for an AWS SNS to send a message, so that from here you want to trigger another microservice with an event based, right? So this specific Amazon, SNS can be used for the integration purpose from Node.js to AWS Amazon SNS. From here you can have a multiple services get triggered in the entire flow. Similar way, the similar purpose SQSQ also, you want to send an event back to your queue, so that it's a queue, right? First it takes the information in a queue order, and then first in first out kind of thing, whichever is going to be inserted first, and that specific sequence only the order is going to be executed. That kind of actions that you can do on this specific layer. Similarly, let's say you have an AWS Lambda, right? You want to monitor how the requests are being managed, how many requests are being coming in. So the advantage of this serverless architecture with AWS, the main advantage is like you no need to bother about server, but internally this AWS is gonna, or else the cloud is gonna take care of your server management. When I say server management, it's gonna increase the load balancing, or else it's gonna increase the what I would say cost related factors based on that the traffic. If the traffic is in peak time, then it's gonna increase the instances automatically, and otherwise it's gonna decrease the instances. You no need to bother about this entire life cycle of it. You just have to keep your functional logic here in the AWS Lambda, that will take care of this entire journey get initiated. So now when you have that, right, you want to understand how, what is my traffic and what kind of CPU usage, kind of other devices, or else is there any failure of this API at any particular time. Those kind of things you can, monitor that information in AWS CloudWatch. So it's a kind of another AWS service, so which is gonna give detailed information about any of the AWS service. So from the same AWS CloudWatch you can watch all the logs about the current AWS Lambda function what you are using. So what kind of costing it has been, taking based on our traffic and usage, and all other, related networking information also will be monitored here in the AWS CloudWatch. And then let's say this AWS Lambda, who will have by default access, like only the IAM access management people, whoever having that access, only they'll have this access. But let's say you want to expose this AWS Lambda to any of the developer team also, kind of way, then you just use the Amazon Cognito for giving the access for this AWS Lambda service. And IAM people have all admin rights, kind of thing, so they can manage this life cycle of this AWS Lambda, whether they want to terminate it, or whether they want to roll back it, or they want to extend this Lambda, kind of things that's going to be coming here. And this is how the entire journey in AWS, the serverless microservice architecture flow is going to happen, and end to end. So but just want to go with another version with Node.js. For that you just subscribe channel, so that I'm going to cover this specific example in case of Node.js, how this flow is going to happen. So you want to understand, like from client the request comes here, and then just it's a kind of demo. So I'm going to cover that in the next video. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you like the video, just like it, and then you can add comment, share and subscribe. And thanks for watching.